All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. See, I took you back to 1983, right? And that's because every superhero has to have a theme song. So that's my theme song today. Um, my talk is going to be about the root cause analysis of HIV. My talk is going to be about the root cause analysis of HIV. And for me, the root cause analysis is my superpower. It is the knowledge and the information that lifted me from the fetal position and turned me into a fucking superhero. So that's what I'm going to share this with you. So, to be clear, we're not talking about the origin of HIV here, right? We're not going to talk about where it come from. We're going to talk about where it landed, why it landed, and why we continue to see people contracting HIV. Now, most of us here are diagnosed with HIV. We received the medical diagnosis, right? Okay. Now, today I'm going to ask you to stretch yourself a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to help us apply a social lens to the HIV epidemic, because HIV is just not a medical condition. It's so much more than that. HIV is more of a social condition. It's more of a social condition than it is a medical condition. The root cause analysis of HIV means taking a look at the HIV epidemic, not just using a medical lens, but instead by using a social lens. You're going to hear me say this throughout my talk. HIV is more than just a virus. HIV is the positive proof of much larger problems rooted in failure to support or turning a blind eye to people's human rights. After all, HIV epidemic, an HIV pandemic of HIV could only happen when people's human rights are not fully fulfilled or just ignored deliberately. What are human rights? Food, clothing, housing, health care, education, language justice, mental health care, substance use treatment, protection from torture and discrimination, the right to a fair trial, the right to vote, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to security and safety. Human rights are fundamental and they are inalienable and supposedly protected by both national and international laws. Supposedly. So, by a show of hands, who has heard the statement HIV is preventable? Everybody's heard it. I've heard it, heard it. So, I attended a lecture. I attended a lecture a year back, and it was a doctor from New York City. And I remember she said that HIV is 100% preventable. And I can still remember to this day how small that made me feel when she said that, right? It made me feel really stupid. I'm not the sharpest tack in the box. I'm like, damn, 100% preventable, right? So here's the thing. We have to challenge. When we hear people say to us HIV is preventable, we have to challenge it. And here's the hit, right? Yeah, HIV is preventable, but it's only preventable in the ideal world. HIV is preventable, but it's only preventable in the ideal world. So when we apply this social lens, I'm asking you to apply this social lens to the HIV epidemic. When we apply the social lens, we no longer solely focus on our risk of contracting HIV. We know what our risks are. Blood, semen, vaginal fluid, breast milk, breast milk, breast milk. We didn't heard it over and over again. We know what our risks are. I'm talking about our vulnerabilities. When we apply a social lens to the HIV epidemic, we're talking about what are the things that made us vulnerable to HIV in the first place. What are our vulnerabilities? So stay with me. So the root cause analysis of HIV teaches us that HIV is only preventable in the ideal world. So what's an ideal world? It wasn't the world I came from, but let's see. Our ideal world is one where all people have access to affordable, stable housing. That's an ideal world. Everybody has nutritious food. They have access to quality education. They have access to medical coverage. This is an ideal world. They have access to reproductive services. It's a world where homophobia and transphobia no longer exist. It's the world where abstinence only for sex education is not being taught to our children. An ideal world is where people are really safe from racism and discrimination, where English is not the dominant language, where there's an end to mass incarceration and unlawful incarceration, where harm reduction is a public health approach and not frowned upon, where substance treatment programs are fully funded, where communities have political power to vote because they are not incarcerated or on probation, and a world where people willfully receive HIV testing and don't fear without the fear of HIV criminalization. This is a world that's ideal. So when we say HIV is preventable, remember it's only preventable in an ideal world, because maybe some of us or most of us have experienced some of these factors that I just talked about. And these are factors that we can't separate from HIV. And also an ideal world is a world where people living with HIV don't have to carry the weight of taking the entire blame of contracting HIV. I just said we were already vulnerable in the first place. Before we got to the blood, before we got to the semen, before we got to the vaginal fluid, before we got to the breast milk, what were our vulnerabilities? An ideal world is where we can all be superheroes, with or without HIV, because our rights are being upheld and we have the information and the tools that we need to succeed. One of the takeaways that I want you to have is that we cannot afford to walk around taking the entire blame of contracting HIV. We cannot walk around taking on the entire blame of contracting HIV. We can't ignore those systemic factors, which they call social determinants. We can't ignore those factors that made us vulnerable in the first place. For many of us, our major vulnerability could have been our zip code. Could have just been our zip code, right? For many of us, we grew up in the same neighborhood, went to school in the same zip code, we shopped in the same zip code, we dated in the same zip code, we worshiped in the same zip code, we fell in love in the same zip code, and we contracted HIV in the same zip code, right? Because we pull partners, we pull in our partners from a pool of other vulnerable people who may have already contracted HIV. So I'm talking about the vulnerabilities. The root cause analysis of HIV is about the vulnerabilities that made us vulnerable in the first place. Not talking about our risks. We know our risks. We need to know our vulnerabilities so we don't take the entire blame of contracting. Listen, this will take you out the fetal position. What I'm telling you will make you powerful. What I'm telling you will allow you to become a strong advocate for yourself and for your community. What I'm telling you will take away some of the shame and guilt that we carry as people living with HIV. Because HIV is only preventable, what? In an ideal world. HIV is only preventable in the ideal world. So with the knowledge of the root cause analysis, the HIV is more than a virus. The HIV is the positive proof of much larger problems rooted in failure or ignoring or turning a blind eye to people's human rights. I rose from the fetal position. And I became this advocate that you see in front of you. And I'm going to tell you right now, over my dead body, will I ever let our governments and elected officials off the hook for their responsibility and accountability to protect our human rights and to ensure our human liberties. Right? So that's what we do. Once we get this information, once we have this information, we don't let our governments off the hook, because they would like us to walk around carrying the whole weight. Because then we say it's all my fault. It was all my fault. Well, I did some things and, so it was all my fault. But what about the vulnerabilities that made you vulnerable in the first place? What about, hey, listen, right? Where I live in Philadelphia, there's a place called Vine Street. Now, I'm 70, so you know what I'm talking about, right? Vine Street is where all the, we used to call them hobos when I'm 72, right? We used to call them the hobo. We called the 8th and Vine the hobo line. It's still the hobo line. I'm 72 now. I was a kid. That poverty is still there. Those people still don't have housing, and they still don't have food. They still don't have the things that they need to exercise their human rights, to have the dignity, right? Because human rights means human. When I say human rights, I mean human dignity. We should live at a higher level than animals. We should have a level of human dignity that we all live at, and our governments have a responsibility to make sure that all of us have access to what we're supposed to have. In fact, they go to the United Nations, sit up there every year, and say, "Yeah, we're gonna go home. We're gonna make sure they have education. We're gonna make sure everybody have food," and then they go sit down. Right. So what I've learned from the root cause analysis is that I'm not going to let the government off the hook. I'm going to hold their feet to the fire. I'm going to make them do what they're supposed to do. They are accountable for every citizen, regardless they're accountable for every citizen in this country, regardless of whatever the healthcare matter is. They are responsible and accountable to make sure everybody has access to what they need to live a quality life. So once I understood how to apply this social lens I'm telling you about, once I understood how to apply the social lens to the HIV epidemic, it was liberating for me in a very personal way. See, because that's when I put away the hammer. That's when we got to put away the hammer. We got to stop beating ourselves up, right? I stopped beating myself up, right? Once I understood that there were social factors, many of which over which I had no control, and those things that made me vulnerable to contracting HIV in the first place. I began to intentionally claim my space. I intentionally claimed my space to breathe and to exist, and to live out loud. I claim that space now because I'm no longer bogged down I'm not carrying that whole weight around that it was all my fault. It wasn't all my fault. It wasn't all your fault. There were factors working that made us vulnerable in the first place. I'm not telling anybody not to take responsibility for their sexual health. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, God, we started from behind the start line. It's not like we had a head start. We're just now getting this information. So here we are at HINAC, right? And we are not going to allow these policies that use criminal laws that make the masses think that if they lock us up, it's going to be a solution to ending HIV. Because that's what they want the masses to think, right? So that's why we're here at HINAC. And the AIDS crisis will only end in the ideal world. It's never going to end until our political leaders have the willingness or to fix some of this stuff, to make sure everybody's housed, to make sure everybody has health care, right? The AIDS crisis is only going to end where there are public health approaches, where there are human rights approaches, where HIV is made a funding priority, and that's going to make our rights a reality. When they make our rights a reality, when our rights are made a priority, when funding is made a priority, when human rights is made a priority, that's when we're going to see the end of the epidemic. Poverty doesn't exist because we can't feed the poor. Poverty exists because we can't satisfy the rich.
That nigga got AIDS.
It was loud. No warning, just venom. Right there in the middle of the strip out room. That's where everyone goes when they first get to prison. Let me back up for a second. I just got off the prison transport bus, brain fogged, shackled, belly and ankle chains, worn out. All I had was a small, wrinkled, brown paper lunch bag, held all my possessions. A man, white, tattooed, about 30, stood in front of me. He was holding like a dirty mop bucket, pushing a dirty mop bucket. I remember the air was stale, that stench of chemicals, but mostly of disdain. He gave me the up down, walk by, AIDS infected motherfucker. And just like that, everything went quiet. The security guard or the correctional officer looked right at us and walked away. Other inmates, they stared at the walls or the shoes, but no one said a word. Me, I also just stood there, not angry, not loud, just there. You see, he said it like I wasn't even human, like I wasn't even there. And everyone else, well, they said nothing, and that type of silence, it's loud. That type of silence, it whispers. You don't matter. But let me share something with you. I matter. And so does every single person living with HIV, behind bars, behind stigma, behind silence. You see, the court system, and when I say they, I do mean the court system, they thought they buried me in the soil of mass incarceration. But they, nor I, really realized at the time, they actually planted a seed. So I want to do more than simply tell you a story, to tell you my story. I want to invite everybody into a reckoning with stigma, a reckoning with silence, and with the choices we make about who deserves compassion. So if you bear with me for a minute, let's start with this. If you could bear with me, everyone just close their eyes for a quick second. Kind of breathe a little bit. Now picture someone you love. Hold that image. Now imagine them in chains. Imagine they are shamed, abandoned, locked away. Not for violence, not because they hurt somebody, but because the law feared them more than it made an effort to understand him. That's what HIV criminalization looks like. It's not science. It's fear dressed up as justice. Now open your eyes, please. Thank you. I want back. I'm really proud to be here today. Some of you may know it's been a journey for me to stand at this place at this time, but don't get it twisted. There's no other place I'd rather be than right here, right now, sharing what I've carried and what I believe we all must carry forward. I want to be clear. I'm speaking for myself. I'm just Kerry Thomas, a 60-year-old black man born in Ogden, Utah, on Hills Air Force Base, a son, a sibling, a father, a grandfather, and I'm a man who's lived with HIV for 37 years since the age of 24. My dad, John, served 30 years in the US Air Force. My mom, Claudia, they raised us, me and my siblings, to be respectful and to have discipline and love in our life. I learned early to be polite, stay out of trouble, keep my head down. Everything gonna be okay. But sometimes doing everything right doesn't end up that way. So I earned a college scholarship, and leading up to graduating, I planned to join the military. That meant a physical, some blood work, including a test I hadn't even heard of and didn't even quite understand. A few weeks later, though, the doctor sat me down. You tested positive for HIV. And just like that word AIDS, I had heard of that. And it was a sentence, not a medical one, social. It changed how I believed the world would see me, and even worse, it changed how I saw myself. My parents and I cried, but we believed I had about 6 months to a year to live. When I realized by the grace of God that I wasn't going to die, it kind of flipped a little bit. Now I was faced with something more daunting. How am I going to live? So I did what I knew best. I kept my head down. I stayed silent. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. I didn't even advocate for myself, let alone the advocates for somebody else. I got married, I became a father, but inside, I was still afraid. I was still silent. So in 2008, I was sucked in by the vacuum of circumstance, and I was convicted for not disclosing my HIV status. I was sentenced to a 30-year sentence. Now let me be clear. I never publicly complained. I never screamed. I never caused any scene. Nah, I was just simply sad, judged, shamed, dismissed. I felt hopeless in the face of this grief, and the backlash of blame was intense, pointing out that I was flawed, that I was damaged, that I was stupid, that I was criminal. When I most needed the love and support, it seemed like there was none to be found. But let me tell you something I've learned. I'll ask you this. You know those two types of people? Those who care and those who care less? My prison experience taught me which was which. So initially, I wasn't treated like a person. I was treated like a threat. Not because of what I did, but because of what they thought I was. HIV positive, Black, incarcerated, a symbol, a poster child for fear. So in the middle of that shame storm, I stopped talking altogether. It was much easier for me to pretend, easier than to defend myself, looking at people who didn't understand. But isn't this why we advocate? Because people right now are still being locked up. Not for hurting someone, but for having something. I wasn't a monster, I was hurting. I was human, and I was alone. Until I wasn't. I started to meet others. Lights in my eyes, I can't see everybody, but I know for sure that there's some people in these rooms. I met people like Sean Strube, Cindy Stein, Tammy, Eric, Kevin. People who didn't flinch and who didn't turn away. You see, they helped me to see that truth isn't weakness, truth is survival. Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is permission. That's when I had to make a choice. If I couldn't speak openly about prison, about stigma, about HIV criminalization, then I wasn't even living at all. James Baldwin said, it took many years of vomiting up all the filth that I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on this earth as though I belonged here. And once I believed that I had a right to be here, I found community. I found purpose. I found that I'm not alone. I found my why. Albert Camus said, and Kamaria constantly reminds me, that the only way to deal with the unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. I've learned that when you're treated unjustly, it's your voice, or my voice, is my greatest weapon. And to speak truth even when your hands are sweaty and your knees are shaking. Why? Because someone out there needs the strength that you show. So today I remind myself that my excuses are seducers, my fears are liars, my doubts are thieves, and my past does not get to steal my tomorrow. Isn't it kind of encouraging how deliberate and liberate kind of complete themselves? We must live in this moment, not this mess, and to participate in our own rescue. I get it. Believe me, I get it. Change is hard. It's even messy in the middle, but I'm telling you, after 15 years of incarceration, I'll tell you, when I walked out that gate, it had a gorgeous end. Now, there's gonna be times when you feel like, I feel like, even to this day, that I'm bending the knee to the ghost of my past, defined by stigma, defined by conviction, by the weight of a system that continues to see my diagnosis as a weapon and attempts to turn a health condition into a crime. But I realize that ghosts only have power if I keep bowing to them. So finding my why, I choose to stand, not just for myself, but for all those living with HIV who are still being punished for surviving. Finding my why, not in shame, but in truth, not in fear, but with purpose. Deidre reminds us every day to have that great day on purpose. I offer that it's time that we stop kneeling to these ghosts and continue dismantling the system that keeps them alive. I've learned that if you try, if you put that effort, you're usually going to get better outcomes. And I know it's crazy times, I know a lot is going on, but I'm here to everyone in this room, we're going to be okay. Let me rewind a little bit, about a little over 15 years. That same officer, the one who walked away and looked away and walked up to me afterwards 15 years later, and by the way, he was a sergeant now after those 15 years. He said, "Sir," literally, "Sir," he said, "Thank you for all the work you've done here since you've been here, and take care of yourself." I looked at him. I said, "Don't congratulate me, just don't stay silent next time." Because this work isn't about applause, it's about action. HIV criminalization doesn't just haunt the individuals, it haunts justice. I know that I can't change my past, but I can refuse to kneel to it. We can demand a future based on science, based on dignity, based on justice. We can move from worry to witness, from silence to solidarity, from stigma to science on that. So let me end with this quote that I love. It says, we must always take sides. I'm gonna start with that again. We must always take sides. Neutrality never helps the oppressor, never the victim. Science encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Injustice isn't new, but change only happens if enough people refuse to look away. I'm to the point in my life, silence isn't an option. Accountability matters. Respect matters. Human dignity matters. And none of these are negotiable, based simply on someone else's prejudice or someone else's ignorance. So I ask you, what is your why? Will you stay silent, or will you act? Will you speak out, educate others, support organizations pushing for change? Because when you care about ending HIV criminalization, we're not just changing laws, we're saving lives. We're restoring dignity. We're renewing what justice really means. This isn't just about me. Or you hear me say from time to time, it's a we thing, not a me thing. Not about me. Tell you the truth, it's not even really about HIV. It's about who we are and who we are willing to become. We can build a future based on truth, based on compassion, and based on science. And let me tell you right now, that is a why worth fighting for. Thank you.
I love you too. So, thank you. Something stirred inside of me, and I'm just giving it a moment to wash over me. I love y'all back. But here we go again. And maybe it'll be different this time because I don't have a microphone in my hand, right? Because when I've had a microphone in my hand, things have never gone well for me. So I'm gonna stand here at this podium and give y'all what I have to give, okay? So, without further ado, call and response. When trans people are under attack, what do we do? For those in the back. When trans people are under attack, what do we do? Thank you. And I'm here to talk to you about what happens when the threat becomes real, right? Although many of you already know I am a Black trans woman, I'm not asking this question of other trans people because for us, the threat has always been real, right? I'm asking this question of all of you who have advocated for inclusion of trans people in your work and your advocacy spaces, and we thank you. The reason I'm not asking that of trans people, again, like I said, is because the threat has always been real with us. And the threat sometimes stemmed beginning in our own homes, right? We had to choose between having what was familiar and going into the unknown so that we can be happy with ourselves, right? Instead of trying to be happy or make someone else happy. And we found community out there when we chose ourselves and left our homes because I didn't want to be tormented. I really didn't. I didn't want to be tormented. I wanted to be free. And we made do with scraps. We did. We realized that we deserved more. As I got into movement work, I realized that I was deserving of more, right? And we fought and demanded access to health care, employment, housing, our education, and to have access to general spaces. And those are being taken away now, sometimes to where we can't even relieve ourselves. And with this administration, it is clear that trans people are the target. And make no mistake, we're definitely under attack. So again, I'm asking, what do we do? But I think a more pointed question is, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to lose? Trans people in this very moment are losing our gender markers, our health care, our ability to care for ourselves, our independence, our basic rights. I've heard stories of advocates stating that they're going to have to leave certain communities behind or disassociate themselves from certain communities. And if you don't know what that means, I'm going to be clear about it. They're talking about trans people, right? Because the federal government is making it to where it will soon be criminal to assist trans people, especially our medical providers. Us as trans people, we have marched, we've protested, we've been locked up, suffered immeasurable abuse, even from those who swore to fight alongside of us towards collective liberation. Again, what are you willing to sacrifice when it comes time for you? Will it be your comfort? Will it be your safety? Will it be your livelihood? Or will it be their relationship with that trans person? Are you willing to be our allies and accomplices when you yourself could be criminalized for offering assistance to members of the trans community? You have to decide. The threat has definitely become real. Medical providers are turning trans people away right now because they do not want to lose their license to practice medicine and their freedom, because some bills are attacking those medical providers in the way that they could lose not only their license, but like I said, their freedom. They could be criminalized for offering any type of care, what some people perceive to be gender affirming care. But in any other sense, they prescribe the same medicines that are prescribed to trans people to cis people. It's still gender affirming care. This is a natural human reaction to want to save yourself, and I get it. I do. I get it. I'm up here in front of you because I made a choice that this is not about me, but it's about those who come after me. Some of you will choose to save yourselves, and again, that choice is yours. I understand that these are uncertain times, so we don't know what will happen. I do know what is currently happening while trans people are being targeted, though. So my ask is that you all not make us the scapegoats. Legislation that is forthcoming will cause some trans people to contemplate detransition for safety, moving to a different place. I myself am contemplating moving out of the country. It's that real. I do believe that there will be a resurgence of the Underground Railroad. I believe that there will be a resurgence of the Dallas Buyers Club. Just speaking for myself, telling y'all my truth. As much work as I've done in public health advocacy, I feel what is happening myself. I just make it look like it's not. But I can't get my hormones. I've gone through that, but these are uncertain times. I don't know how long this is gonna last. So that resurgence of the Dallas Buyers Club, what I have been for other trans people who needed something that I had access to, I've had to call on my sisters to help me with. Again, we don't know what will happen, but remember, for trans people, the threat is already real. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. So before I get started, I just want to thank you all for being here. It is an act of resistance for us as people living with HIV to organize in this space. So I'm so grateful that I get to be with my community on today. So I'm going to do a call and response, y'all. So when I say visible, I want y'all to say power. Visible. Power. Visible. Power. Can I tell y'all my secret? My visibility is my secret. It's that one thing that has carried me throughout shame, throughout silence, and throughout stigma. It's that light that I refuse to dim, even when the world tries to turn it off of me. My name is Marnina, and I get to co-lead Positive Women's Network USA. Thank y'all. We are the only national membership body of women living with HIV in this country. And I say that not to brag, but to give you a full picture, because titles and leadership roles don't erase my truth. I'm still that fat, Black, queer girl from the South who refuses to shut up. I sat in the clinic shaking one day when I got my diagnosis, and I'm still that person that had to battle that own stigma and that feeling that I didn't feel like I belonged in activism spaces. So when I stand on this stage, I don't do it because I have it all figured out. I do it because I know what it feels like to question your own worth and to see that you don't belong somewhere. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to show up at a conference or a clinic and wonder if anyone in the room understands you. To feel like your story isn't palatable or powerful enough. But I stand here not because I'm exceptional, I stand here because I am you all. And I want you to know that if I can do this, so can you. Because every single one of us living with HIV has already survived systems that were not built for us to live. And I want y'all to know that that survival, that's power. And at PWN, we are not neutral. We reject the dismantling of our healthcare infrastructure, and we are holding elected officials accountable in real time, as I know so many of you all in this room are. And we're working in coalition across our movement and in our own communities to organize, resist, and transform the very conditions that made us small and quiet and silent. However, at the same time, I know what it feels to be overlooked, to be underestimated, and to be disrespected in the same places you thought would make you safe. I know what it feels like to walk into rooms where you question if you belong, where your body, your truth, and your existence sometimes feels like it's too much. And if you feel comfortable, I want y'all to do something with me. I want you to raise your hand if you ever felt different because of your HIV diagnosis. If you felt different because of your color, because of your size, your gender identity, your level of education. And I want you to keep your hand raised if you ever felt the need to shrink yourself at a conference, in a meeting, or a space, or just walking around in this world. Now take a moment. I want y'all to look around. You are not alone. Let's use this moment as collective unshrinking, a moment to embrace our full radical visibility as a community. Because we are never too much, the room was just too small. And here's the truth. You don't just get to be visible now, y'all. You have a responsibility to teach others what liberation looks like, because someone is watching you right now, deciding if they can live out loud too. When you fully show up, you give other people permission in the room to show up too. When you speak your truth, you crack open that door with silence. When you live boldly, you model a future where none of us have to hide. As we fight racism, transphobia, misogyny, ableism, HIV criminalization, and the list goes on, we must boldly stand in all of our visibility as an act of resistance, because liberation without visibility is nothing but a performance show. But liberation with visibility, y'all, that's a movement. That's a revolution. So now that you know my secret, I want y'all to walk into every room with your full visibility, shining bright for everybody to see. Because you deserve to exist too. You deserve to be seen, you deserve to be heard, and you deserve to be loved exactly how the fuck you are. So when I say visible, I want y'all to do it for me. Visible? Power. Visible? Power. Thank y'all, family.
How y'all doing? That is awesome. My name is Timothy Jackson, pronouns he, him, Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy for AIDS Foundation Chicago, and I am so honored to facilitate, if I can speak properly, our panel discussion with our panelists for our HIV is Not a Crime Red Talks. So again, just because I believe in honoring people who get up on the stage and doing the things that they do, let's give them another round of applause, please. Thank you so much. So I want to start out with our panelists, and each one of you all can go down the line. I do want to kind of just talk on, obviously we're here to talk about HIV decriminalization. What do you see as the biggest barrier to our work in reforming or repealing HIV criminalization laws in your work, in your personal experience, anything that you feel like sharing?
Okay, so for me, I think the biggest barrier to our work is willful ignorance. People, especially when it comes to HIV, they don't want to even know about it, and that does play into like the criminalization aspect of it, because again, I was talking about people and their safety, right? They don't want to be locked up, right? So if they know their status, and Wahida spoke to this, is that knowingly part, right? And you were imprisoned under non-disclosure, right? You know, this is where we are. People are still in survival mode, self-preservation, and if I don't know a thing, then I can't be prosecuted about that same thing, right? And so, but for me, it's really hard to like try to shrink myself. As Wahida said, PWN told me that I had a voice, and they told me to use it, and they taught me how to craft it, right? They taught me how to craft my message, and so I will be forever be grateful for all of the lessons that I learned there. So I refuse to shrink myself, and even though I am where I am in a position of leadership, I know that it has its drawbacks as well, but there's no going back for me. Like, I can't undo what was done, right? And what was done was that I chose to speak out and speak up, because that's what I learned at the Speak Up Summit. But that's what I have.
Thank you so much. Carrie?
Same question.
Yes.
First, I want to look at everybody in this incredible. It's an honor to be part of this panel, no doubt, no doubt. But to answer the question, I'm going to say complacency.
Mm.
You know, if anything, if incarcerated taught me, it's a long game. You got to play the long game. If you're in this thinking it's going to be 6 months to a year, this may not be for you. And that's also okay. Because we have to kind of join together to be able to work through this with all the frustrations, ups, downs. I think that I think advocacy is right here. You know, doing it for the fun stuff is like this. You know, if I'm doing it for the sugar high, so to speak, you know, this ain't it. This is that granola, you know, that got the munch on and everything. But all kidding aside, I think it's that stick-to-itiveness
Yes.
that what I've learned in this short amount of time being around everybody that sticks out. I mean, I see many faces that are just doing it over again, you know, until we get it right. So yeah. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah, so I remember, I think it was at our first HINAC, we talked about messaging.
Mm.
And we came up with this brilliant messaging, and it said, you care about HIV criminalization, you just don't know it yet.
Yes. Yes.
You remember that? Y'all,
Yep.
anybody remember that? And I find that when we go to communities and we train advocates, Kenya, you remember we went down to that place where you and I went when we did the health in our prisons a couple years ago. And when we first asked the question, what do you all think about HIV criminalization? Should they lock people up? Yeah, we need to lock them up. Yeah, they should hold. Yeah, we should lock them up. When we got done with the educational part, they were like, wait a minute, that's discrimination. They can't do that. Wait a minute, people do care, but they only care if we give them the information. And I heard Carrie say that our silence is permission, right? So we have to not give people permission to be silent. Our job is to educate our communities. We can't talk about HIV criminalization here and then go home and not continue to talk. We have to educate the young people, the old folks, the in-between folks, right? Because they do care about HIV criminalization. They just don't know it yet. It's our job to make sure that they know that they care. They'll call it out. You talk to somebody about what's happening, they'll tell you, that ain't right. They can't do, that's the first thing they'll say. They'll call it out. So let's make sure that they understand that they do care about it, and we carry the messages.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wahida. Marnina.
I think it's all wrapped up in the fact that HIV criminalization is a racial justice issue.
Woo.
And we live in not only a misogynistic and also a world where we don't see black and brown folks as fully human. If white folks were contracting HIV at the same rates as black and brown folks, we would have ended HIV criminalization by now.
Wow. Yes.
It took them a couple of it definitely I definitely appreciate our elders who stood on those front lines to make sure that we had access to care and treatment. I stand on the shoulders of them, but I also know that if those first folks were black and brown who were trying to fight for access to care, they wouldn't have gotten the same treatment. And so I want us to realize that the reason why HIV criminalization still exists is also because it creates a patient to prison pipeline for people living with HIV. That's the reason why we stand in the shadows and don't talk about HIV criminalization so broadly, because sometimes it's our own internalized stigma that we're dealing with. And so I also want us to think about that when we think about how HIV criminalization continues to be prevalent in our communities.
Okay, thank you so much, Marnita. Y'all can give her a hand. We're gonna sit down on the end with Marnina. We were talking about this earlier before this began, but what advocacy strategies are currently working, and which ones do we kind of need to put on the shelf and leave alone?
I don't know if y'all know this. I don't know if y'all know this, but Tammy and Kamaria co-lead the Zero Project, and I know they don't like me to point them out in the room, but they are two women, dynamic women living with HIV. Okay,
Yes.
y'all don't see. This is probably the only conference that I know of in the United States where people living with HIV-led organizations are running the conference.
Yes.
It's led by us, for us, and by us. And so we love that. And I love the fact that they are still working to make sure that we have spaces like this to dream, imagine, convene, and also lead our own liberation work. What I will say is not continuing to happen, and what we're not seeing a lot of, and I talked about this a little bit in Bully, was I would really love for us to bring back our cultural practices into the work that we do. We need more joy. We need more healing. We need more intergenerational relationships. We need to be building relationships with each other because our elders would get us in the kitchen and would cook alongside us. I know that's how I learned to cook.
Yeah.
My mama brought me in the kitchen and sat me beside her while she showed me how to clean the chitlins, right? While
Yeah.
she showed me how to cook the greens. And so we need to be bringing up our young people behind us and having them sit in coalition meetings with us. You should not be going to a coalition meeting by yourself if you're not bringing somebody with you. That's not true leadership. And so that's what I would say, bridging the gap.
Anyone else want to join on that question?
Well, I'll go. So currently, actually happening today in Pennsylvania, Judiciary Hearing Committee. There's some folks up there right now from Pennsylvania repealing, getting HIV criminalization laws repealed in Pennsylvania. And what they're doing, they're offering public testimony. Right, they're offering public testimony. There's two people from the Pennsylvania HIV Justice Alliance, and then there's also a medical provider, and there's an attorney. Right. So I think that what we keep doing is we keep demanding that there is a public health approach, right? We have to show the weight of science. We have to make sure that our legislators are understanding the weight of science. We didn't know what HIV was back when they made these laws. They didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was. These laws are as old as those old station wagons we used to ride in the back of. You remember those old Esquires? Was it Esquire? That's how old these laws are. Now that we know what it is, and now that we're at the beginning of the end of HIV, we need to let them understand that the laws have to meet the science and talk about how. And we have to talk about and some things. Listen, some people only value money. You got to talk about how it's going to save money, of course, but we also have to talk about good community health. Right? So values, we have to talk to our legislators, and we have to talk with them and meet them with everybody values community health. Good community health. We have to make them think they're getting something out of this too. Because they're not going to do it just for us. We have to make the other side think that they're getting something out of this as well. Right? So keep talking about the values of community health. People are going to have to go back to work. They can go back to work. They're going to get better. The community is going to be better. Just, and everything's better, but you have to include them in it. Or else they're not going to, they're not going to want to do it. But I think that what's important is that we have to be able to keep talking about how stigma is driving this epidemic. Stigma is driving this epidemic, and ending stigma is the public health approach that we need from every legislator in every state, everywhere. We need a public health approach to ending HIV. We can't punish our way out of it. We're not going to medicate our way out of it, right? But we're going to have a public health approach that ends stigma, that makes people able to get care, make people willing to get care, right? When it's safe, and like Sean Strobel always says, If they make it safe for us to disclose, we would all disclose, right? But yeah, so yeah, and that's another thing we have to work on. How do we get laws to protect people living with HIV? We have laws that it's a hate crime if we do something to somebody because of their sexuality, but it's like yard out when it comes to people living with HIV, right? So there's always work to do. There's always mentoring to do, and I never want to pass the torch. I'm a person that want to pass the baton because when you pass the torch, they might burn it down. But if you run in step with them and pass the baton, we're in it together, and we're going to show you what we got, and then we're going to push you off for you to go across the finish line. So mentoring is always a piece of it, right? We have to always not be selfish and be teaching the next generation. Teach them how to be leaders. Challenge them to be leaders. Challenge them to not to just be like they're coming to a show, like they're the audience. We are not the audience. We are the celebrities. We are the performers. We are the doers. We are the activists and the advocates who are going to get it done. We have to stop showing up like we're the audience, like somebody else is going to come and take us out of here, right? We the Harriet Tubmans. You talked about the Underground Railroad. We the Harriet. It's a Harriet Tubman and all of us in here, and we have to all lead each other, right, to that place of liberation. So I hope that made some. I hope that made some sense to somebody.
It did. Carrie, the enviable task of following Miss Wahida.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of make it real simple, and I think we don't have enough of this in our communities. Real simple. I don't know, but you'll show me. I think we've created an
Say that
environment.
again, please. Please say that again.
I don't know, but will you show me?
Yes.
I think sometimes we created an environment where folks are hesitant to ask, hesitant to get involved. So for me, the question is always to myself, what can I do to get people in the door? Is there something that's lacking in me? The outward more projection. And I think that at least that's how that's my been approach too. And I live in a state that's real difficult to get people involved, for a variety of reasons. And that's I kind of just see them where they're at, and then we'll get where we want to be.
Okay, so for me, I've had this conversation with funders, right? So I'm gonna go that route. It can't be business as usual. It really can't. And
Yes.
so we need to be focused more on collective care than a deliverable, right?
Yes.
So if you really want to fund these different communities, then fund them to do the work that they know how to do. You just said, I don't know, but will you show me?
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to learn from us. They want us to follow their, what is it, RFP? Yeah, or whatever it's called. Yeah, they want us to follow their design, right? Because it's much like a reporter. They come to us with a story, but they have an angle, right? And so as a funder, they have an angle. They want to be, oh, wow, look at what we're doing for this community, right? But what are you really doing for the community when the community is not able to move in a way that it needs to move? We are the ones that are boots to the ground. Sorry to say that right now. Don't nobody start dancing. But we are grassroots. That's what I meant to say. We are grassroots, right? Still boots on the ground, but we know what works for us, right? And so I alluded to it earlier where I was speaking about the Dallas Buyers Club, right? So right now, a very personal thing for me is that when I started making too much money for the Ryan White program, right? The ending the HIV epidemic initiative took over somehow. I didn't do anything. I don't know if it was my work with the federal government. I honestly don't know how it happened, right? But I know that my medicine was coming to me faithfully and I didn't have to pay a dime. And now with RFK Jr. in office, right? And all of the cuts that Doge and Musk have done, right? To try to save waste. I know now that when I got that phone call from Healthcare Pharmacy, you still at this address? Yes. Okay, well, we're sending out your medicine. Dovato, right? Yep. That medicine is $7,000 a bottle, right? and copay with my insurance, but this is just me because I'm in the leadership position that I'm in, right? I can budget $200 out of my paycheck a month for the copay. That's not everybody's experience. And I keep saying that over and over and over because I keep getting asked these questions. What's going to happen? I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers, but I know that whatever I can do to help, I'm going to do. And so that's what I've been asking or demanding of the funders. You know, when it comes to trans people being under attack, what are you willing to do to fight against what the federal government is doing? Because when you don't have ties to the federal government, like my job does, I don't have to worry about if I'm going to lose my job and not be able to afford that copay. Because then the real threat has become real for me. Like, how am I going to survive after the 30-day medication runs out, right? And so I haven't gotten that medicine sent to me, but I got that call. And I've been on 3 different trips now, and that medicine still hasn't made it to my mailbox. It was delivered. So I honestly don't know what's going to happen with the Ending the HIV Epidemic initiative. I know that I've read some articles that are saying that, yes, they took out the vaccine funding, they took out the research funding, they took out USAID funding, they took out PEPFAR, right, with the global response, and said that people domestically are safe. But really, really, so those that are in our corners that have been providing these resources, now they need to change what it is that they're asking of us for this money.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, and any of the other panelists can follow. Do we need to do a better job of mutual aid within taking care of our own selves?
That's gonna hurt some people.
Mm.
Uh, you
Say
know,
it anyway.
but I'm gonna say it.
Yep.
Because I'm claiming this time. They too scared to say it, but I say it. Exactly. That's what I was talking about. More money for mutual aid, more money for people who are on the ground in real time, seeing what the need is without having to deal with a damn deliverable, right? So,
Yes.
more unrestricted funds from funders.
Yes.
Yes. And not questioning when you have mutual aid, not trying to make it so restrictive. People living with HIV are also people who use drugs, right? And many programs out there want you to be sober. Well, that's not a reality for a lot of people because of those social determinants of health,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So sometimes I need to find a way to escape. And I'm just using I statements because I have the microphone, but that is the general consensus with people who are using drugs for whatever reason. More often than not, it's for an escape from their reality, right? And so when it comes to us having mutual aid, stop being so restrictive. Stop becoming the oppressor with your money, right? And I'm gonna leave it for someone else.
Anybody else want to jump on that one? Or we can go to the next question.
I think Tiami dropped the mic on that. Like, because in order to have mutual aid, you have to have the resources to set up mutual aid at an organization. So thinking about like all of the red tape that it takes to even distribute that mutual aid sometimes is tedious. And so we have to have amounts of resources that we can distribute to our communities to be able to make sure that we keep everybody safe. And also, we need to be creating loopholes. Like if you're a program director or somebody that's over programming, create loopholes within programs to make sure that trans folks have access to the things that they need. We need to be working in coalition space with each other because that's the only way that we'll get to liberation is with each other because all of our liberation is interconnected, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, well, and I think that I'll just add, I know Ariana from Florida, the Yeah, yes, exactly. I know that she has a program where she's been helping with utility bills and things like that. We need to find out how she's doing that. I don't know if she's going to continue to be able to do that, but whatever model that she's using. So if we know somebody that's already like doing that type of mutual aid, how are they getting it done? How are they able to support their community members, even though they have this restricted funding, right? So let's have a discussion about that. Bring her in here and let's figure that out. Let's see if we can use her model or we can create this other model that we can present to the funders because all the money belongs to us anyway. All of it's our money. You know, those pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, this it's all our money. And that's what I always say. I'm giving that money back over my dead body. Whatever they give, we gonna spend it because it's ours.
Yeah. And I want to, because I want to be mindful of time, we're going to ask the panelists to answer this one question, and then we're going to open it up for our audience to ask the panelists questions. So, this last question is how can national and local movements better support each other in the fight against criminalization? And we can start here on this end.
First, I think a good way to start is to do away with the idea that being first to do something is, and then having someone like mimic what it is that you're doing. Stop being upset about it. You know, well, I was the first. Well, baby, it doesn't mean that the same thing ain't happening over here.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what Wahida just said. Like, what is Ariana doing? How is Ariana able to do that? Because that's not just a need in Southern Florida,
Yeah, that's right.
right? So, and we've had these conversations where I was just in a room full of Black trans women, and we knew that being first doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best, right? Someone can pick up what it is that you're doing and make it even better, right? But then we get upset because, oh, they're getting more money for doing this, right? But I did it first. So then we have to have ownership. So the way that we can work together national and locally is to actually like see what it is that each is doing, what's benefiting, you know, and model that. I truly believe that that's how we're going to get to where there is no new transmissions, no more criminalization, because we're not going to care so much about being the first to do something or being better at doing something, but we can do it together. I didn't vote for Hillary, I'm not going to lie, but I do believe in that campaign. Stronger together. I also didn't vote for Trump. Don't get it stupid. Don't get it twisted. Okay. I did not vote that. Okay. So I just was not in the space at the time where I believed that that was what going to save me, that either was going to save me, you know. But since then, I have had a change of heart and I realized like the importance of my vote. But I had to go through that process myself.
So I'm going to come from a different. We talk a lot about the MIPA principles, you know, and I believe in them full heartedly. So I would say, with that in mind, to start to reach out to the folks that are with lived experience as part of the solution. And what I mean by that, I was very fortunate. Um, I don't have to believe the stars are in line, but I do believe in a higher power. And I had to do, no question, I had to do my part. I set that aside just for a second. But we know there are people that are still incarcerated under these statutes or being charged. Are we reaching out to those folks to find out what their situation is? I think that I've learned through this process the value of storytelling, um, and the value of having that first person. This is what's happened to me, to direct our policies and our approach. And I think, or I feel, that in some areas the movement has grown so much. My concern is that we get away from that, from just what our true foundation of ending HIV criminalization is about. And don't get me wrong, you got to teach me every day about how diverse it is, and it's so many different angles. It's bigger. It's not just one thing. So that's why it's a difficult question for me to answer. But I wanted to bring this back to the folks that like in Ohio looking at, a 50-year sentence, or somebody and a gentleman in Washington looking at 90 years. What are we doing to center them, to move them along as well?
So I was thinking, self-identification is very powerful, right? And right now I'm with a group of folks, the Reunion Project, and we self-define long-term survivor. We didn't let them tell us what long-term survivor was. And the reason why I'm there, because we get to do everybody. You get to tell us that you're a long-term survivor. So are we allowing, maybe I'm back on the last question, but I'm still thinking, are we allowing these funders to tell us who we are, or are we telling the funders who we are? Because we told them we were servicing long-term survivors. We didn't say 50 plus. We said long-term survivors. Then we told you that you self-identify as a long-term survivor, so come on in. So we got people where's Portia? You here? Portia's is on our work group, and she's a long-term survivor because she's identified as a long-term survivor. Then we have people who are older that identify as long-term survivors. So it's up to you, because we have an inclusive definition. So we made a definition that was inclusive and self-determining. So if you think, look, I know I'm 70, but I might think I'm 30. So I'm coming in on the, coming over here because, you allow me to self-define myself. So I'm just strategizing, just thinking right now. But as far as the nationals and the locals, I think that we, as the caucus, right, are we doing enough to bring in the local organ? We're bringing in the net. We have 6 awesome other national networks, right? Should our charge be for us to bring in our local networks into the caucus as well? Because I'm thinking that it's a way of sharing resources. It's a way of getting out of silos. The more local folks, the more local organizations that we bring in. And I think that maybe that's the way that we do it. We're trying to get individual members. I wonder if one of the things we need to be doing is trying to bring in all those local organizations. Now, mind you, some get federal dollars. So we get it, right? But some don't. And some don't. Like the Union Project, we don't get federal dollars, but we don't work on policy, right? But we joined the caucus so we can help y'all work on policy, right? So how do we get around? We can get around things, right? So sometimes we have to just figure out how do we get around some of the barriers that we have to making us work in silos, right? I think we're smart enough to do that.
So if you are not a membership body organization or organization that is led by people living with HIV, you should be working in coalition with people living with HIV. You need to be working alongside CRO. You need to be working alongside the caucus. You need to be working alongside Transgender Law Centers and Positively Trans, and making sure that you're working in coalition and in tandem with us and learning from us and allowing us to lead. And not just in name alone, because people like to say that a lot. They like to say, oh, we're doing MIPA centered principles, and they just already have the agenda and have had a meeting before you even got there. And I like to tell this funny story before I end. Wahida always says, and has told me since 2018, don't go to the meeting and eat the chicken. And I was like, what does that even mean? And she said, they're going to serve you some food when you get there, but you can't make a decision because your mouth is full. So when you go to a meeting, you never eat at the meeting. You eat after the meeting or before the meeting because you want to be able to make decisions. And so if you're sitting on cabs, coalition spaces, make sure that you are leading that meeting and make sure that you are in a decision-making space. And if you're not, make them give you a decision-making space for being a part of their space.
Well, thank you all so much. We're going to give this mic to Kamaria, and if you all have don't leave.
Questions.
If you all have any questions, raise your hand, and Kamaria will bring you your mic.
We only have time for 3 questions. I'm making an executive decision. There's your glasses. Check your Hoover for announcements for the schedule change. We're here till 4:30. That's why question time is limited. So I'm gonna go here because I see your hand up. So somebody in the middle, get your hand ready. Whoever's hand gets seen first gets to ask their question.
And there will be some announcements once Q&A is done.
Give you the mic. I'm sorry.
This question is for Taomi. You mentioned in your speech about we may have to go back to the Dallas Buyers Club and Underground. What is your suggestion that we should do now to prepare for that?
Okay, so I was speaking from like a real life experience, right? And so when it comes to my HIV meds, right, I've had to change different regimens because I was having a personal issue with them until we found one that worked. Well, I had a surplus of meds that other people are taking, right? But they served me no purpose. So instead of throwing them away, I gave them to who was needed, to who needed them. And it's the same thing with like my hormones. If any trans person is being prescribed pills, chances are they got that little blue pill and it's a 2 milligram pill. And right from whether it's in Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, it doesn't matter. Every last one of us are getting the same regimen. Well, I know people who have a surplus of medicine just like I did because we make personal choices whether this may not be for me, right? I need to do something different. And so sometimes, we go from the pills to the injectables, right? So we have a surplus of medicine. I'm not going to let it go to waste when I know that there are trans women out here who don't have the services that I have, right? So I'm going to make sure that I can give them what it is that they need so they're not doing like black market things, right? Or they're not going in, for lack of a better word, like the seal doctor, right? Because we know what happens to our bodies when we introduce foreign substances to us. So I'm trying to keep, what I mean by that is people are already prepared because it's already happening. I just named it. It's not nothing that we have to get ourselves ready for. It's already happening, sister.
And if you are not ordering 90-day supplies of medicine, you should be doing that. Everybody in here, don't you should not be on a 30-day where they fill your prescription every 30 days. Ask your doctor to write you medications for 90 days. If that yeah. If it will cover it. But a lot of times they will, right? And we should not everybody in here should be in an emergency state of mind, right? Because that's what we're in right now. So that would be like something you would do in an emergency, right? You would have your flashlight, you would have your extra medications, your band-aids, and you need to have extra medicine as much as you can. So if you haven't asked your doctor to fulfill your prescriptions for 90 days, then I would suggest that we all do that.
Hey, my name's Janae, and my question is for the group. And when we look into decriminalization of HIV as a whole, that is for me, that's every part of community, being the older and also the younger generation of individuals. My question would be, how do you think we could approach the youth in today's time to get them to be a part of the decriminalization efforts? Because those are our future leaders.
Well, I think it was named by Marnina. Um, we can't be the gatekeepers. I've been in this movement work for 11 years, but I started out as a founding member of Positively Trans. Now I run the program. So I'm always looking for emerging leaders, right? And that goes, but Marnina specifically said if you're going to like these coalition meetings, bring someone with you, right? You're going to bridge that generational divide, right? Sometimes it's an older trans woman, like in age, almost 50, right? I have access to certain spaces, but there are also people, I don't always want to go places. So let me bring some people with me, who have the energy to do it. Because I didn't have the energy to walk from here to the lunch thing, but I did it. Why? Because I saw an elder do it. So, and that elder could have easily have been on the wheelchair, right? So, not the wheelchair, the cart, golf cart. So, not being a gatekeeper and actually being willing to bring someone in, it doesn't mean that I'm no longer valuable. That a lot of us are thinking that we have to be the ones to do this work because if we don't, I heard it said in a room, and I'm not going to mention who said it, they feel like they're going to die if they don't have anything to do, right? And I don't feel that way. I want to rest. I I give you radical rest, okay? I will turn off my phones. I will. Well, I ain't gonna turn them off, but I will ignore your call. I will do that because I believe in radical rest. I have to take care of myself too.
I would also say that it's a two-way street. So, like mentoring is a two-way street too. And so the person that's the mentee should also be teaching the mentor some stuff too. And so it should be a mutual space where we're learning together and where we're breaking down systems together because I believe that everybody has something to teach you. And so what I will also say is the way to engage a lot of younger folks is by also joining the platforms that they're on. Most young people are on TikTok. So spreading information. We're on our phones all the time, posting, talking. We need to be also updating and talking about HIV criminalization and talking about that all on our social medias the same way we post our selfies.
And I was just want to say, and we talked about this in Bully the other day, but these young folks know how to organize. I told my son the other day, I said, yeah, I said, they call it, what's this call? Yeah, they call them pop-ups. Because I told my son, I said, what was the word before pop-ups?
Kickback.
Where they used to call them all together? Well, anyhow, whatever I said to my son, he said, Mom, that's so passe. I said, well, passe. What do you mean passe? He said, they're doing pop-ups now. Because they used to like, they have social media. They know where to meet at. They know how to tell you to meet on this corner and we be here and I want 200 people here at 7 o'clock and they'll be there. How do we tap into those youth, right? That know how to bring other ones along and how do we promise them that we'll listen to them? Because if we're able to get them in a room, we're not going to get them in a room to talk to them. We're going to have to get them in a room so we can listen to them so that they can tell us what their ideas are. Because we know some stuff. Right, but it's very different. Their challenges are different, and yeah, but we have to let them be the experts in the room, you know. So I think that if we're able to get young folks there, we're going to keep them if we allow them to help lead us too. Louder for the people in the back. Okay.
No. I'm just
We have time for one more question. All the way in the back, for real, really?
So this question is for Carrie specifically, listening to you talk about centering the experiences and the voices of people who've been personally impacted by HIV criminalization. Something that I am kind of struggling with this idea is how to do it in a respectful way without re-traumatizing people and making sure that we're doing it in a way that's kind of more trauma-informed.
That's a very excellent question. And again, all I can do is speak for myself and then my experience work with other people who are in similar situations. So I would ask that it comes from a place of just listening first, giving people the opportunity to share their story. Again, it's not something that happens overnight. And I know they're short on time, and I'm just going to give the example I'll give is how Sean Strube approached me. Because of the traumas I experiencing during incarceration, when he reached out, I was very hesitant. The media was very challenging group to work with. In fact, and I've shared this a couple times, when I was going to the visiting room to meet with Sean when he did show up, I literally leaned forward to the officer and said, look, as he was taking me in, I said, hold up, give me about 5 minutes with dude, you know, and then just take me back to my cell. And I'm happy to always say 8 hours later, that's when I joined. And so the question, to answer your question, what did Sean do? He provided an opportunity for me to share who I am. Not a sales pitch. He was just compassionate. That's what's missing in our dialogue sometimes. Now, it's hard to do that, and I understand the why behind we don't do it that way, because it takes time. I love the social media that I'm picking up on, and everything's just instant, but empathy is a slow process. Empathy is a drip process. It's not microwave, and so that's how I would answer that. Just provide people at their own time is the way that you get around the trauma. Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you all so much for our panelists. Let's give them another round of applause.